You are listening to Meet the Thriller Author, a podcast where I interview authors of mystery, thriller, and suspense books. I'm your host, Alan Peterson, and this is episode number 186. This is a special episode. It's a personal one for me. It's dedicated to a friend and best-selling author, John Hindmarsh. John passed away on Sunday, May 29th. In December of 2016, he was diagnosed with leukemia. John was a fighter. He gave leukemia hell for more than 5 years, and during that time, between chemo treatments and a myriad of health problems that come along battling cancer, he wrote and published 11 novels. His latest series was a best-selling Jack Foster space opera novels, and he published 4 books in that series over the past 6 months. And that series took off like a rocket, pun intended, since it's sci-fi space opera. Those 4 books have close to 9,000 Amazon ratings with an average of 4.5, which is just amazing. And it's been a big thrill to watch John's books take off like that. I met John about 8 years ago or so at a local meetup for indie authors that I host here in San Francisco, in the San Francisco Bay Area. And John attended that here in the city. And we quickly became friends. He was originally from Australia, and he had that Aussie Brit sense of humor and had such a passion for writing. He told me that he was certain that the writing helped him successfully battle leukemia for years. When an oncologist had originally told him that he was looking around 3 months to live. So obviously that doctor didn't know John very well. John and his lovely wife, Kathy, moved to Southern California a couple of years ago to be closer to family. And then the pandemic hit. So I haven't been able to see him in a few years in person, face to face. But because of the pandemic, our meetup moved virtually onto Zoom for the last couple of years. And John always zoomed in. Once he even zoomed in from his hospital bed. That dude was one tough Aussie, I tell you that. But I was happy also that a couple of weeks ago, even though he was dealing with a stronger chemo regimen and was while battling also a very painful bout of shingles, he still showed up for our Zoom for our monthly meetup. He talked about his runaway best-selling Jack Foster series, the 2 books he was planning to write, and he had a big smile on his face. So just that was a very inspirational guy. And I was certain he was going to be able to finish those 2 books, but unfortunately he passed away. But I'm fortunate enough to have met him, and I'm honored to call him my friend. And John not only wrote space opera, sci-fi type books, he also wrote a whole bunch of different genres, including speculative fiction, and he also wrote thrillers. He had a popular techno-thriller series called the Mark Midway books, the Mark Midway series. And in 2017, I had the pleasure of interviewing John for my podcast. I've interviewed many authors, close to 200 now, but the very few that I've known in real life and have been friends. So it's a lot of fun to interview John for my podcast since we knew each other well. But anyway, I wanted to share that interview here with you, with everyone today. So it is a replay, obviously, back from 2017, but it was a lot of fun. So I'm honored to show that to you, to replay it to you for this episode of the podcast. And I also wanted to share a link to a donation page for the American Cancer Society. If you go to thrillingreads.com/donate, that link will take you to their website. Your donation to the American Cancer Society helps to fund cancer research, education, advocacy, and as well as patient and family services. So it's a great cause. All right, here is my interview with my friend, John Hindmarsh. Hi, everybody. This is Alan Peterson with Meet the Thriller Author. And for this episode, I have John Hindmarsh on the line on Skype. And he writes thrillers. He also writes science fiction books, so we'll talk about that too. But we're going to focus on his thrillers. And John, how you doing?
I'm enjoying a view of blue sky and snow at the moment.
Oh, nice. Yeah, not up in the mountains, right?
Yep, Lake Tahoe.
Yeah, I was just thinking that you're the third person that I'm interviewing for the podcast that I've actually met in real life.
Oh,
yeah.
Right.
Yeah, so that's kind of an interesting little side note I was just thinking about. For the listeners, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your books?
Sure. I'm Australian. The accent is slightly blurred because I've traveled and lived and worked in a number of countries, from New Zealand to the UK to Turkey to Singapore to Thailand to you name it. I've been there, sort of thing. I think I've worked in about 12 or 14 countries. So that has an obvious influence on my writing because I've got memories of different places that I can draw on to put into my stories.
Yeah, I was saying that should be really cool too, because most people rely on Google Maps, and you can go from memory of all those places you've been to.
Well, it helps add a little bit of color. I still use Google Maps. It's a good way to localize yourself, because you can see you can see the buildings and so forth, and that's a good refresher.
Yeah, that is amazing. I could just look at the street or how traffic is at a certain area. I love Google Maps and the YouTube videos on that.
Yep.
So can you tell us a little bit about your thriller series, the Mark Midway series?
Yeah, I created this guy who I call Mark Midway, and I got very creative about the titles of the books, and that's why they're called Mark 1, Mark 2, Mark 3, Mark 4. And I'm about to start on Mark 5. He's genetically engineered, but he doesn't know by whom or where or when or who his parents are or anything like that. And part of his motivation is to both find out his history, but also to have a family life, because he never had that. So that's the background of the personality. The genetic engineering just increases his reflexes, probably his intelligence level, but not to any marked degree. They're light thrillers as opposed to dark or noir thrillers. And I use a bit of science. I use a bit of banking. I worked in banking as an IT consultant, so I bring a little bit of that into, to flavor the books. I sometimes get the FBI stuff wrong because I haven't worked for the FBI, but readers tell me about that.
Oh, so that's good. So you get feedback from the readers. You could make changes if necessary.
Yep. I get feedback.
And is Mark Midway, is he American or British or Australian?
Oh, well, because of his genetic engineering, we're not really sure, but
cool.
He originated somewhere in a lab in Eastern Europe, and the first book starts with him being taken as a child from a location where he was being looked after by a housekeeper and a drunk alcoholic tutor, and the person who picks him up assassinates both of those and takes this young child to Centraal Station in Amsterdam and hands him over to a lady who takes him to America. So that's the sort of prologue to Mark 1. And the story picks up, though, when he's a young adult. So it just gives a bit of mystery around his origin.
Mm-hmm. That sounds really awesome. And is each book, I mean, it's part of a series, but are they each adventure is a standalone story?
It's difficult to sort of put in the fourth book everything that's happened before, so they have to be standalone to a large extent. It's very difficult with a series that's going to end up with being 5 or 6 or 7 books, to have them not as standalones. There's a little bit of the history that's relevant, but generally you can pick it up and read it. I think version 4, you don't need to have read version 1 or the first book in the series, but it would help because it's got a little bit of that background and so forth.
And I see you also write, I was looking at your website, you also write the science fiction books as well. Is there a big difference between writing a science fiction and a thriller?
Well, it's a cliched comment, but I claim there's science in my thrillers and thrills in my science fiction.
Oh, that's a good you should use that as a tagline. I like that.
Well, the science fiction is very different, and I'm about to look at future science fiction stories. I've just finished a trilogy, the third book of a trilogy. It's gone off to the editor, and so I'll be looking at new books, new science fiction books, and they'll have no relationship. One's an apocalyptic story, one's an AI, artificial intelligence story. Another one I'm trying to develop that takes a scout, a space opera stuff. Takes a guy in a scout ship and wrecks him, and so on and so on. So it's all adventure with touch of thrills and suspense. That's the only link back to the thrillers. The thrillers and the science fiction are very different. That's not my dog barking.
No, sorry, that's mine. I'm going to go to throw something at it right now. Were you a fan of these genres as a reader before you started writing in them?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
In both areas, I've read, I started reading science fiction as a child and tried to write one when I was about 12, 13 years old. And on the thriller side, it was more adventure stories, I suppose, but certainly the Sherlock Holmes and the Saint stories by Leslie Charteris, and then British writers like Len Deighton, who did the Ipcress file, and in Edgar Wallace, I suppose, going back to those British sources, and then modern British writers like Lee Child and Mark Dawson. So there's on the thriller side, I can sort of draw a spectrum from way back to now in terms of the books that I enjoy, and they perhaps influence some of my writing.
And how long have you been writing for?
Serious writing, I started 2011, 2012, so not that long. There's a story about my first book that I'll give you. It's a science fiction story. I wrote it in the mid-1980s, and for some reason put it in a box, typed it, put it in a box, and put it away. And a few years ago, my wife and I, Kathy's American, were talking about moving everything I had in Australia to the US. And I was in the garage packing and came across this box and sat down and read the book because it was far more interesting than packing. And I thought to myself, there's a story in this. And that became the first book of the trilogy. That's Broken Glass on the science fiction side, which I self-published and released, about 2012.
Oh, so that's cool. So it actually sat in the garage for a while, and then...
For years, for 30 years.
Oh, wow. That's incredible. Wow, that's pretty sweet.
Oh, it needed a lot of work doing to it.
Yeah, well, but you, like you said, you read it and you said, hey, there's something here. So yeah.
And, I had 3 editors work on it with me. So, my objective always is to try to get a professional finish to my stories. And it's sometimes difficult to find the right editor. I think I've got the right one now. She's doing a good job for me. So it improves that finished quality.
Yeah, that's always a challenge for going the independent route, finding the right editor and cover designers and all that.
Yep.
Yeah, your covers are really amazing. I was just looking at them all here on your website. I've told you that before. I really like your covers.
Well, I set out. I'd had covers designed by a designer here and a designer there, and I thought there's no branding, there's no theme, there's no sort of thematic presence on either the science fiction side or the thriller side. And on the science fiction side, I found a guy who did some very nice work, and I asked him if he was prepared to do covers for me, and he said yes. And he's done the 3 covers for the trilogy and a box set cover. And on the thriller side, using Mark Dawson again, I found his cover designer because his covers look very, very good as thrillers. And I found his cover designer, and he produced 4 covers for me, which are tremendous branding. You can look at each book and you recognize that A is a thriller, but B is a part of a series. It works. There's a product there, and that's one of the objectives of writing is to build that product identification.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you look at them, you know exactly that it's your work, that's your product. So yeah, it's a real nice job. And when you're writing your stories, or when you're getting ideas for your stories, especially like you have this genetically altered person here. How do you get ideas like? Is it you said from your own experiences in banking? So it's stuff from like your real life, and then like the news, or how does the spark start for you when you start writing?
Well, some of the color, some of the background I get from experience, having worked in different countries and so forth. But the ideas can come from anywhere. I keep some files in, what's the product called? It's one of these note-keeping products that I can...
Evernote?
Yeah.
Yeah, I love Evernote.
Yeah. And so I've got, these are just the titles: Super Recognizers, Maritime Stuff, DARPA, the double-edged sword at the center of the U.S. military, Transcranial Direct Current Stimulation,
That's interesting.
Hackers Remotely Kill a Jeep on the Highway, Killer Robots, Turing Test, Robotics and the Lessons of Cyber Law. So, I gather this material and as a part of the research, and I then utilize some of it, or it sits there and does nothing. But the super recognizer is a topic that I want to use in an offshoot thriller of the Mark Midway series. Super recognizers can look at an ear or a part of the cheek in an image and recognize who that person is, and that's a tremendous talent. I mean, I suffer from the opposite. I can't recognize people.
So that's a real thing. People really have that. That's
yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yep. It's acknowledged psychologically. There's been a lot of press last year. It was used in the UK. It is used in the UK by the police there. They have 2 or 3 or 5 people on the force in London who have this ability, and they can look at riots and violent protests and pick up enough of a face, even though the face might be masked, to know who that person is.
Oh, that's fascinating.
It's going to be one of my thrillers. The Mark V one, though, is going to be the maritime stuff. Mm-hmm. Companies like Rolls-Royce Engineering are developing automated freighters and tankers. They can be unmanned and controlled from shore. So it cuts down on the expenses because they don't have to have a crew and so forth. But those vessels would be subject to piracy, and I want to utilize that with one of the characters in the Mark Midway series going off to rescue a tanker, and then Mark Midway having to go and rescue him.
Oh, okay. So you're kind of like spinning off characters from the Mark series into their own stories, or is the...
Well, it will be a Mark story, but a friend of mine is my personal trainer, and he tortures me. So in Mark 3, I created him as an FBI agent and had him tortured in the story.
Your revenge.
My revenge. And he still tortured me, so I've got to bring him back into one of the Midway stories and torture him again, and Mark comes to the rescue.
So does your trainer know that he's part of that book?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yes.
He got a kick out of that?
Yep.
Oh, that's funny. And do you see any of your personality make it into Mark Midway or any of the other characters, or just your trainer?
I think just my trainer. I had to take revenge on him. I don't use, sometimes I see someone and think, oh, that would make a good character description. But I tend not to describe characters too much because I think readers build their own images of characters in books. And I don't think you need to spend time saying that, a woman's got blonde hair down to her shoulders and, ruby lips. People will put that into place, I'm sure. So I don't spend time there. I focus more on the dialogue and the tension and the thrill, so that there's a compulsion, hopefully, that keeps the reader turning the pages.
How do you write? Do you outline and plot a lot beforehand, or are you like pantser?
If only I could plot. The characters keep taking over. Now, historically, what I've done is started with an idea, get an idea of, add an idea of the ending, and then just dive in. That's undisciplined and cuts down productivity, I think. So I'm going to try being far more disciplined about the plot outline because I want to use a software tool called Dragon to dictate to my computer or dictate into a tape machine and have the computer transcribe it. And that increases productivity. It's got the potential to double productivity, and that's, I think, important from a writing perspective.
How many books do you have out now in total?
With the one that I've just sent off to the editor, that'll be the 8th book.
Wow.
And I've got a collection of short stories that I make available to readers via my website. I don't sell that collection. It's something for the readers that they can get for free.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, is that on your website?
Yeah. If someone goes to the science fiction slider that appears at the homepage, there's a short story collection there, and that can be downloaded if they subscribe to my newsletter.
Oh, yes. Yeah, so that's Hindmarsh.com, and I'll have a link to it on the website too. And so, what do you like when you start writing? Do you do you just work on one novel at a time, or do you like working on both of your science fiction and thrillers at the same time?
No, I work on one book at a time, although I might have ideas sort of bubbling around. I might, for example, in the next week or so before I start Mark 5, I might write out a couple of concept ideas so that I don't lose track of them. And then when I finish Mark 5, I'll come back to those and look to see if there's one that I want to write out, or I might come up with another concept. It's a crazy creative world.
Yeah, it is. And when you're actually writing a novel, like what's your process like? I mean, do you have like a word count goal that you shoot for every day, or?
When I started, 5 years ago, I was very much like that. I had 4 days a week, Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday, Friday. They were my writing days, and I treated it very much as a project, and had to achieve 2,000 words a day or something like that. Then a couple of years ago, I went back and did some more consulting in the finance industry for a year, and that sort of drew me out of that writing approach. And so last year when I came back into it, it was just head down and tail up. And I released 2 books last year and did half of the book that I'm getting edited at the moment. So I did about 2.5 books without that project discipline. So at the moment, I don't know what my process is going to be. I want to do plotting. I want to use the Dragon dictation approach, and that could give me a 3,000 to 5,000 word a day output if I do it properly. But it means I've got to train myself to tell the dictation software where to put the commas and the dashes and the new lines and so forth. So it's going to be an experience.
Yeah, that's interesting, because you always hear that the Dragon users always say you got to train your Dragon, but yeah, you have to train yourself to train the Dragon.
It's a two-way street.
Yeah. And then you also have to dedicate time for like the business part of it too, the marketing and all that stuff. Do you dedicate time for that so it doesn't interfere with your writing, or?
It's been a mix. I started getting serious with 2 new books going out last year. I started getting serious about marketing probably in October, November, and it's taking, I suppose, 40 or 50% of my time to organize marketing, to work out promotions, to get newsletter subscribers, to write to them in newsletters, and then reply to them when they reply to me. It is time consuming. Even designing the website last year, I didn't develop it, I designed it. That was time consuming. So it does eat into your time. And again, referring to Mark Dawson, one of his comments is that he was asked by someone in an audience where he was presenting how much time did he devote to writing and how much to other things. And he said, he spends half a day writing and a half a day marketing and so forth. And the lady who'd asked the question said, "Oh, so you're only a part-time writer?"
Yeah, that's an interesting way to look at that, I guess. But
yeah. You produce 2 or 3 or 4 books a year.
Yeah, you're part-time.
Part-time.
And so, what gets you going to continue writing on your series? Is it, obviously, like you're enjoying it, and you have your fans, a growing fan base. Is that keeps it going for you?
Well, if I wasn't enjoying it, my mantra has been, if you're not enjoying it, stop doing it. Mm-hmm. And that's even been with IT consulting. If you get on a project that's totally not what you want to do, it's a nonsense to continue on if you're not enjoying it. So you've got to be prepared to make that break. But writing has been sitting on my shoulder for years and years and years as something to, it keeps nudging me saying, you've got to write. And I sat down the other day and wrote out the number of concepts that I've got, ideas for books, ideas for series. And I got to 9.
Wow.
And I thought, okay, I'm going to be writing for the next 20 years.
Your retirement.
yeah, so much for retirement. I spend probably a good 8 to 10 hours a day in both writing and doing the promotional work and so forth. There's no retirement here.
And do you work out of do you have like a special, like a area in your house, like a home office or something that you always work out of, or do you mix it up and go to a coffee shop?
I'm not a coffee shop writer. I mean, I go to a coffee shop because I like coffee, but I can't sit there and write. I haven't tried it, so maybe I could. But if I'm going to use Dragon, there's no way.
Oh, yeah, that would be impossible.
Yeah. I've got a study or an office, whatever you want to call it, that's on the second floor. It's got a view of the backyard, and I can see probably 30 trees, pine trees. They're 40 foot high. With a hell of a lot of snow.
Yeah, I was just going to say that to the listeners. Is John's backyard is? I've seen the pictures. It's like the Sierra Mountains. It's beautiful, with a lot of snow right now.
It's. I've had up to 6 feet. We've got a 6-foot fence around the block, and it's been up to the top of the fence. It's now down to about 3.5 feet, so it's melting.
Oh, okay. Only 3.5 feet.
And it's been a rough winter here in terms of the need to do snow shoveling. I've got snow shoveler elbow.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I remember those from my years in Minnesota. But that's a lot more snow than we would get at one time.
Well, they've had, I think I mentioned that, they've had 60 feet of snow on the mountain resorts.
Wow.
So it's been a tremendous season.
Yeah, after those years of droughts in Northern California, at least those people must be happy, the ski resort people.
Oh, yes. Wow. But it stops me walking. I like to walk in the mountains, in the forest. There's a forest area that got burnt out 8 or 10 years ago here, and there's a lot of regrowth, and it is just so nice to walk in, and that's where I do my creative thinking. Is I go for a walk, and if I strike a block of any kind and think I don't quite know where this should go, I get up and go for a walk.
And do you take a notebook with you, or do you record it if you get an idea when you're walking?
Well, I'm going to take a recorder because I want to get this damn dragon thing sorted out. But I don't take a notebook, but I'll be talking to myself into a little recorder because that's part of the voice recording process to computer is to record to a file on little hand recorder and then transfer the file across to the computer and have it transcribed into a Word document. So that's going to be an interesting process.
Is that Mark V that you're going to be using that?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Mark V is the starting point for that process. Yep.
Oh, we'll have to do a follow-up interview. I'm curious to see how that works out for you with Dragon and dictating versus. I mean, there's still a lot of writing to be done because I'm imagining afterwards, but still, it's an interesting process. It's fascinating to me. And so, are you? So that's the next one. That's what you're working on next. Is Mark V?
Yep, Mark V.
Okay. When do you anticipate that coming out?
Go away.
Yeah, that's a loaded question.
Assume a 3-month cycle. There you are. It's going to depend on how long it takes to adapt to Dragon, and if I can get the productivity that Dragon promises. I don't mean Dragon the company, but the technique of dictating. If I get that productivity, then I'll have a book off to an editor in 2 months' time. If I don't, it'll be 3 months' time.
A busy year.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, I've got to write these books.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It's sitting on my shoulder, beating me up. Write me.
So do you still find you're so busy with the business and the writing? Do you still find time to read?
Oh yes.
Yeah.
I read science fiction and I read thrillers. One of my favorites is Lee Child. I would sit down and read a Lee Child book any moment. And looking at the bookcase behind me, which is predominantly science fiction for some reason. It's everything from Asimov to Weber, with people like Modesett or Cherith or whoever in between. Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, I always find it interesting that reading is such an important part that almost everyone that I've interviewed, I always ask that question because I'm curious. No one can give up the reading, even if it's just a little bit, during the day. Everyone still reads.
Yep. No, I read a book. I read something from a book every day. It might be a science fiction book. It might be a how to do this book. It might be Training Your Dragon book, or it might be Lee Child or Mark Dawson or whatever.
Yeah. Yep, I do the same thing too. I try to read every day. So how do you interact with your readers? Are you active on Facebook and social media and all that good stuff?
I'm not that much of a Facebook operator in terms of communication with readers. I have a newsletter that I send out probably every 3 or 4 weeks, and I get replies from readers as a result of those. And I reply to the individual emails that come back. So it's I get emails from people in Adelaide in South Australia or in the Arctic Circle when I was complaining about having too much snow and it being too cold. So someone saying, hey, if you think it's cold, come here. And the others were saying, hey, it's midsummer, almost 105 degrees. Why don't you come here? So, there's a lot of reader interaction. There was an email I got a couple of minutes ago before we started talking, and it was basically saying, where is it? I enjoyed the Mark I book. Thank you for introducing me to your series. So, when you get emails like that, it helps the motivation part.
Yeah, it's just amazing that the people reaching out and that they liked your work so much that they reached out to you. That's the coolest feeling in the world, really.
It certainly is.
Yeah, because sometimes it's like you're writing in a vacuum, like, all right, is anybody even reading this? And then when you get that, it's like, all right, one person.
Well, I think a lot of writers, I can't say all writers, but I think a lot of writers, because they're writing in that vacuum, they finish something and they start to worry, is it any good?
Mm-hmm.
Will that work? Will someone be interested in reading that? And I did a promotion at the end of January and had almost 67,000 copies of Mark I downloaded. So people like the idea. They like the how it presents, and hopefully they're enjoying reading it.
Yeah, that's just amazing. That's just blows my mind. 67,000. So, I mean, you have almost 70,000 people had downloaded your book. I mean, that's just amazing. That's like that's like the population of a town.
Yeah.
Of a small town. That's
of a small town. Yeah. Well, I was brought up in a town of 25,000, so you know.
Wow, so double your hometown, more than double.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow, that's incredible. That's amazing. Okay, well, John, I'm not going to take too much more of your time here, but is there anything else you'd like to tell our listeners about writing or about your book series or anything?
I suppose the only thing is to make a request, and I think every author has this request somewhere in their mind. When you read one of my books, if you like it, if you enjoy it, put a review on Amazon or Apple or wherever you bought the book. And even if you didn't like it, put a review there as well. You know, it helps the author to understand what the readers are looking for and what they're enjoying.
Okay, John. Well, thanks so much for joining us on the podcast. Really appreciate it.
Oh, well, thank you for asking me to be one of your interview people.
Rest in peace, John.